Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to call this business meeting to order, and I'm pleased to welcome everyone back as we get started with another busy year, hopefully productive year on our committee. Plenty of important work behind us, proud of what we've accomplished, and plenty of work ahead of us. So this afternoon we begin by voting on a couple of nominations, and after discussions with our friends on the Republican side, I will not be calling up one of the nominations that had been noticed, and that is the nomination of David Ullman today. So this morning, one of our colleagues informed me that she was still waiting on an outstanding information request that had been made of EPA, information that she needs in order to consider whether she can support the nomination. The requested information has nothing to do with the qualifications or the conduct of the nominee, nor is it related to the position the nominee would serve in once confirmed. It's not just, there's no correlation there. But I promised that my staff and I would work with EPA to try to ensure to the best we can that this information is provided promptly so that Mr. Ullman's nomination can be considered at an upcoming business meeting as soon as possible. As I think you know, Senator Capito and I always try to work with our committee colleagues to address needs for information, and I've committed to do so in this case as well. However, the EPA and the other agencies we oversee need qualified nominees, as you know, to fill key positions. We have a responsibility as well to ensure that those positions are filled. And we'll now consider the nomination of Christopher Frey. I asked Christopher, I said, how do we remember to call you Frey, not Fry? And he said, there's a band called the Frey. And if you will just call me after the band, we'll keep it straight. So Christopher Frey has been nominated to be the Assistant Administrator for Research and Development of the Environmental Protection Agency, and Martha Williams to be Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Since the adjournment of the first session of the 117th Congress, President Biden has renominated these two individuals to the same positions they were nominated for in the previous session. And just last month, this committee favorably reported the nomination of Mr. Frey, and I'm hopeful we'll do so again this afternoon. We'll also be voting on Ms. Williams' nomination. This is the first time I believe we're considering her nomination, so I'd like to say just a few brief words about her if I could. As we heard during her nomination hearing in November, Ms. Williams has a proven track record of bringing people together to solve complicated conservation challenges. And that is why her nomination enjoys a broad stakeholder support, including from environmental organizations and sportsmen and women alike, including, I think, both senators from Montana. She's ready to roll up her sleeves and get the job done should she be confirmed. I plan to vote yes on her nomination. I'd urge our colleagues to do the same. In addition to voting on these two nominations, we'll also consider 18 GSA resolutions, and when we have completed our votes, we will immediately move on to today's hearing on the Water Resources Development Act. Looking forward to that. I want to thank everybody for input to help us get to this day. And with that, let me turn it to Senator Capito for any comments you'd like to make, and after that, we'll recognize other members in order of seniority until we have a quorum, and then we'll be voting. Senator
Thank you.
Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and thank you for calling the business meeting today. And welcome to the committee for our first meeting of the year. It is an understatement to say that we accomplished a lot in our last year together, and I look forward to many more ways that we can work together in 2022. Together, today we are gathered to consider a number of GSA resolutions, as you mentioned, and a nominee I'm pleased to support, Martha Williams, to serve as Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. In my discussions with her, Ms. Williams agreed to preserve opportunities for hunting, fishing, and other outdoor pursuits important to many West Virginians and across this country. She has been very much shown a willingness to work with Congress. She's provided detailed responses in my letter asking how Fish and Wildlife Service would use its American Rescue Plan funds, and also provided substantive, thoughtful responses to the questions I submitted for the record following her hearing, so I thank her for that. Equally important, her staff has been responsive to mine when my staff has had policy questions or requests for additional information. Ms. Williams and I will not agree on everything, but she has shown that she takes her responsibility to be accountable to Congress very seriously, and I commend her for that. Those same principles of transparency and accountability guide my decision to vote no on the nominee for U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, as we are considering him today, Dr. Chris Frey, as I did on the last time his nomination came up. My basis for opposition remains unchanged. It's not really what Chris Frey, how he testified or what direction I think he might go. It is really the fact that the EPA simply will not be transparent about its plans to pursue policies that could raise already surging energy prices, hurt workers in West Virginia and across the country, and make America, I believe, less competitive. Almost a year ago, when the committee considered EPA Administrator Michael Regan's nomination, I feared that he would be walking into an administration where he wouldn't be able to call the shots, where unaccountable climate czars, including Gina McCarthy, would set the agenda. And unfortunately, that prediction has played out exactly as I had thought. Just last week, McCarthy stated to the New York Times about how she'd spent the last year, quote, overseeing a whole-of-government effort to put our country on a path to tackle the climate crisis. President Biden has not even bothered to nominate someone to lead EPA's Office of Air and Radiation. That's the EPA office that's in charge of climate issues. No incoming administration has waited this long to send up a nominee for this critical position. The previous record was 260 days set by former President Clinton. Instead, Ms. McCarthy is directing climate policy shielded from the public eye with no accountability to Congress or really to the American people. Last April, Administrator Regan appeared before this very committee and promised to provide me and our committee with the EPA analysis developed to support the U.S. Nationally Determined Contribution, or the NDC, excuse me. In that new NDC, that agreement that was under the Paris Agreement, President Biden pledged to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions 50 to 52% from 2005 levels to 2030. Now, 9 months later, Administrator Regan still has not provided us with the analysis. Senator Inhofe also requested information shortly after that hearing. In August, EPA staff responded to him in a letter on behalf of the White House, admitting an analysis existed, but claiming that Gina McCarthy and her office ultimately called the shots on the NDC. So in September, Senator Inhofe and I, along with House Energy and Commerce Chairs Kathy McMorris Rogers and David McKinley of West Virginia, asked the White House for more information. No response. Now it is 2022, and we still have no information about how the NDC, which is supposed to guide all of the administration's climate policies, how it was calculated. This stonewalling by EPA and the White House is just unacceptable. We know the analysis has been done, so why hasn't it been shared with us? Well, here's two possibilities. Either it shows they cannot meet their goals at all, or it shows that meeting the NDC would be politically and economically devastating through aggressive, top-down regulations across all aspects of American lives. While EPA and the White House have kept any information about development of the target in the shadows, outside groups have tried to crunch the numbers. In December, the New York Times reported that current policies would only get our country halfway there. An analysis shows that even the now stalled tax and spending spree known as Build Back Better may not fully close the gap despite its proponents' promises. We know the bill would further raise prices, kill jobs in states across the country, and lead to more waste of taxpayer dollars without meeting the pie-in-the-sky climate goals. Even so, hiding the analysis in the shadows is not fair. American people deserve to know the supposed benefits, and especially the outside cost of what the administration is committed to internationally, what that will mean to their lives, and how the administration plans to fundamentally alter our economy to achieve those goals. With that in mind, unless my outstanding oversight requests are fully responded to, I cannot support advancing the EPA nominations. Thank you.
Well, as tempted as I am to respond, I'm not going to do that at this point in time. I think we have, I think Senator Sanders has joined us now, and I believe Mary Frances, does that give us 13, okay, great. So puts us in a position, I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being punctual. And I'd like to call up presidential nomination 1557, that of Martha Williams of Montana, to be Director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And I move to approve and report the nomination favorably to the Senate. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. The clerk will please call the roll.
Mr. Bozeman. No. Mrs. Capito.
Aye.
Mr. Carden.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
No.
Ms. Duckworth.
Aye.
Ms. Ernst.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Graham.
Yes, by proxy.
Mr. Inhofe.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Lummis.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Markey.
Aye.
Mr. Merkley.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Sanders.
Aye.
Mr. Shelby.
Aye, by proxy.
Ms. Stabenow.
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Mr. Wicker.
Aye, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 16, the nays are 4.
Thank you very much. Next, let me call up presidential nomination 1562, that of Henry Christopher Frey of North Carolina, to be Assistant Administrator of Research and Development of the Environmental Protection Agency. I move to approve and report the nomination favorably to the Senate. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. The clerk will call the roll, please.
Mr. Bozeman.
No.
Mrs. Capito.
No.
Mr. Carden.
Aye.
Mr. Kramer.
Aye.
Ms. Duckworth. Aye. Ms. Ernst.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Graham.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Inhofe.
No.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Lummis.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Markey.
Aye.
Mr. Merkley. Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Sanders.
Aye.
Mr. Shelby.
No, by proxy.
Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Sullivan.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Mr. Wicker.
No, by proxy.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the yeas are 11, the nays are 9.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Lastly, I want to call up 18 GSA resolutions to consider en bloc by voice vote. And for the record, Chair observes that a quorum is present in the room. Given the presence of quorum, I move to approve and report these matters favorably to the Senate. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair? The ayes have it, and the measures are approved and favorably reported. The business meeting portion of today's committee's meeting is concluded. I want to thank everyone for attending and being so prompt. Let's now turn to today's hearing. Thank you all. Ben, thank you. I'm pleased to call this pleased to call this hearing to order. Today, we're going to continue our work on this year's Water Resources Development Act, affectionately known as WRDA. And by hearing from our distinguished witnesses from the Army Corps of Engineers, Assistant Secretary Connor, welcome, and to also welcome General Spellmon, and we thank both of you for joining us. I know that just earlier today, I think it was earlier today, that each of you appeared before the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Is that correct? All right. And it's like a day, I'm tempted to say day-night doubleheader like they have in baseball, but it's a morning and afternoon doubleheader, so we're grateful that you're here. It's a big day for WRDA on Capitol Hill. And let me start by taking a moment to note our committee's successful track record on bipartisan water legislation. I'm proud of the work by all of our colleagues and our staff members, and I'm grateful for the partnership that I enjoy with Ranking Member Senator Capito on these issues and on so many others. This has made it possible for us to pass our Clean Drinking Water and Wastewater Bill as part of the historic bipartisan infrastructure law last year, and to pass and then enact multiple bipartisan water resources development bills in the last several years. And those of us on this committee know that the process of working on WRDA every 2 years presents us with an opportunity to assess the Army Corps of Engineers operations, to see how we can better support and equip this vital infrastructure agency with the tools that it needs to succeed. The Corps has an extraordinarily important and difficult mission, as we know, with projects needs that far outweigh the available resources allocated to it. Indeed, due to years of underfunding, the backlog of authorized but not completed projects has grown to over $100 billion. That is more than 15 times the agency's annual operating budget, 15 times. When the demand for projects so outstrips the supply of resources, the Corps is placed in an untenable position. Moreover, its decision-making process grows far more difficult as the agency struggles to address both backlog projects and the new needs of many communities grappling with the impacts of climate change, such as sea level rise and extreme weather. Fortunately, with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and several supplemental funding bills, along with what we expect will be included in the annual appropriations measures, the Corps will be looking at a total of somewhere between $80 to $100 billion in available annual funding over the next 5 years. It doesn't wipe out the backlog, but it's a great step in the right direction. With a significant influx of funding, we now have an opportunity to take time to review the Corps' statutory authorities and to make sure the agency spends these resources wisely, fairly, and in the areas of greatest need. Many smaller, disadvantaged communities, including those in rural and tribal areas, have great infrastructure needs. Yet, they are typically the last to receive assistance, due in large part to outdated budgeting practices. That is why we included several provisions in a 2020 WRDA bill directing the Corps to increase its work with disadvantaged communities. We are interested in hearing from our witnesses today about how this work is going and how our committee can work with the Corps to better assist these vulnerable communities. It's also imperative that we discuss how the Corps' work must adapt to the increasingly powerful storms, more devastating floods, encroaching sea levels, and seemingly endless droughts we continue to witness across our country. And to better respond to these worsening impacts of climate change, the Corps needs to update its economic assessments and engineering standards. Assistant Secretary Connor, let me just again congratulate you on your confirmation. But Assistant Secretary Connor, I recently wrote to you about the need to update engineering standards in response to directives from recent WRDA bills. This includes the implementation of natural and nature-based project planning requirements. As my colleagues frequently hear me say, Delaware is the lowest lying state in our nation. Our state is sinking, the seas around us are rising, and other states are seeing something similar to that, particularly along our coasts. We are acutely aware of the need to develop solutions that not only work today, but also will protect us well into the future. Incorporating natural infrastructure into resilience efforts in Delaware and in other states has been and continues to be a critical element of long-term solutions. The Corps needs to embrace and use natural infrastructure in combination with engineered solutions to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And that means ensuring that local project sponsors are aware that natural infrastructure is an available option in project demand. Moreover, the federal government needs to plan for the climate reality that we face, and we know that failing to do so comes at a steep cost. The 7 most severe storms since 2000 cost our country a total of $1.3 trillion. Let me say that again. The 7 most severe storms since 2000, the year 2000, cost our country a total of over $1.3 trillion as homes and cars were destroyed, people's jobs and lives were uprooted, and travel and tourism came to a halt. $1.3 trillion. Throughout the past 30 years, much of the Corps' funding has been provided in response to disasters, not in preparation for them. Our country must become more proactive, addressing climate change before the storms arrive and preventing these massive losses in the first place. So let's begin our work on WRDA this year with equity and climate in mind, along with traditional issues such as navigation and flood control. Let's keep them at the top of our minds. My hope is that today's hearing will provide us with important insights into these challenges. General Spellmon, Assistant Secretary Connor, we look forward to hearing your insights that will better inform our work on this next authorization bill. Welcome very much. And Senator Capito, I'm delighted to recognize you for any comments you'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Carper, and welcome to our witnesses, Assistant Secretary Connor and General Spellmon. Last year, this committee took the lead in the passage of the historic bipartisan infrastructure legislation, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I'm pleased to begin 2022 with a discussion of how we can build upon that success by advancing the Water Resources Development Act, which we call WRDA, get this legislation to enactment. Since 2014, the committee has kept to its biennial WRDA schedule, authorizing water resource projects and setting national policies for the Civil Works Program of the U.S. Corps of Engineers every 2 years. I look forward to continuing this track record. The Corps' main mission in the areas of navigation, flood risk management, ecosystem restorations, safeguard our communities, and support economic growth. This fact was underscored just a few months ago when portions of Louisiana were protected from devastation thanks to the Corps projects constructed in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Moreover, recent supply chain disruptions and accompanying inflation have highlighted the continued need for investments in our nation's ports and waterways, which facilitate the movement of billions of tons of goods and commodities in the United States. These projects and activities are authorized and directed by Congress through our WRDA legislation. The most recent iteration of WRDA in 2020 included several project-specific authorizations, modifications, as well as programmatic reforms. It also provided the Corps with a number of new authorities. The committee continues to oversee the implementation of provisions from prior WRDA legislation. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on the status of the implementation of WRDA 2020 as well as other outstanding policy changes. And I also expect there will be project-specific questions from our members. All of this will inform the committee's work on future WRDA legislation, which has begun in earnest. I thank all of my Senate colleagues and their staff because they've submitted their proposals for the committee's consideration. As I've previously said, it's important that any future WRDA legislation supports the timely and efficient delivery of water resource projects in communities that need them while continuing to meet our national priorities. We must also ensure that communities have access to the requisite technical expertise to address their water resources challenges. The opacity of the Corps' process and programs is a recurring issue. We must not be overly prescriptive, however. Our nation's water resources are diverse, and communities know more about their New York needs than the policymakers here in Washington, D.C. We must preserve the role of our non-federal sponsors in project delivery processes. We must also take care not to divert the Corps' focus away from its primary mission areas. That said, the Corps ought to work with Congress, vice versa, to make sure that we're spurring innovation. And now is the time to deliver those projects better, faster, and as the General and I were speaking earlier in the lead up to this, with the enormous infusion of funds. Delivery of this legislation comes as the Corps manages the $17 billion in supplement appropriations provided to it by the IIJA, which includes funding for WRDA 2020 authorities. That's more than double the annual appropriations and represents an real opportunity to reduce the backlog of some core projects. Prompt responses to oversight requests from the committee regarding this funding are critical, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the Corps' next step to implement the legislation. In that vein, I would like to thank the staff at Corps Headquarters and the Assistant Secretary's Office for their attention to committee requests for information regarding prior WRDA legislation and in advance for their continued assistance as we move forward. Let me reiterate my gratitude to our witnesses for being here today. As I've said in prior hearings, the mission of the Corps are more critical than ever, and the testimony we'll hear today will inform the committee as it moves into its integral role in improving our nation's infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Senator Capito, thank you very much. And now it's our witnesses' turns to share their thoughts with us today and respond to our questions. I think we'll begin with Assistant Secretary Connor. Mr. Connor, you're recognized for your statement again. Congratulations on your confirmation, and we look forward to working with you today and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Capito, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with my partner, General Spellmon, to testify regarding WRDA 2022. I'm Mike Connor, as has been noted, serving as Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, a position I've been in since November 29th of last year. Thank you again to this committee for moving my nomination forward. I've submitted my written testimony and will summarize a few highlights. The Army Civil Works program is the largest water resources program in the nation. It serves 3 primary missions: flood and storm damage reduction, commercial navigation, and aquatic ecosystem restoration. It also addresses a host of other water resources and infrastructure needs as directed by Congress. The Corps of Engineers have contributed significantly towards the nation's well-being, supporting the economy with its infrastructure, and protecting and improving the lives of Americans with actions to address flood risk, environmental protection needs, even drought. Today, the Army Corps is committed to the national effort to work as partners with communities to improve their resilience to extreme weather events and other challenges related to a changing climate. As the President has made clear, this administration is focused on increasing infrastructure and ecosystem resilience and decreasing climate risk for communities based on the best available science, promoting environmental justice and disadvantaged, underserved, and rural communities, and creating good-paying jobs. The Army Civil Works program will continue to work within its own authorities to tackle the climate crisis at home. Of course, we participate in a whole-of-government effort, including the Interagency Water Subcabinet and the Coastal Resilience Interagency Working Group. WRDA 2022 is where we can continue to ensure the authorities necessary to implement the administration's priorities. The President has set a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities, the Justice 40 initiative. I am committed to working with Lieutenant General Spellmon to seek opportunities to secure environmental justice and spur economic opportunity for disadvantaged communities that disproportionately experience the adverse effects of climate change. I should also make clear the Army's role in supporting a broad range of infrastructure and landscapes. The Army works with our nation's coastal ports to maintain their channels, operates and maintains the inland waterways of commerce, supports state, tribal, and local flood risk management activities, restores significant aquatic ecosystems, and operates and maintains significant multi-purpose dams and reservoirs that exist behind those dams. It's a great story. But much of the water resources infrastructure that the Army Corps owns and operates was constructed over 75 years ago and will require significant investments to maintain. As noted here, there have been significant investments, and we appreciate Congress's support. As the Army works on policy and administrative changes to improve infrastructure development and regulatory responsiveness, my staff and I are looking at authorities, policy, regulations, and procedures to identify opportunities for increased efficiency and effectiveness. This is particularly necessary given the substantial resources provided to the Corps this past year and the importance Congress ascribes to our programs. We want to ensure that Army Civil Works is using its significant capabilities in an equitable manner, that it incorporates natural and nature-based infrastructure solutions into resiliency efforts, that it reduces redundancy, and that it delegates authority for decision-making to the appropriate level. I'm committed to working closely with the Chief of Engineers and his commanding officers to position the Civil Works program for continued success. With respect to specific matters of interest to the committee, we are working with OMB to finalize a proposed rule to implement WIFIA as provided for in the 2020 Energy and Water Appropriations Act. This proposed rule would implement a new federal credit program to support investment in non-federal dam safety projects through credit assistance to maintain, upgrade, and repair non-federal dams. This new federal credit program will provide another way for non-federal dam owners and managers to enhance the safety of their dams while also addressing water supply, energy, and environmental needs in a changing climate. The Army has completed 18 WRDA 2020 implementation guidance documents and made substantial progress on the remaining guidance. Certain provisions may require rulemaking, and you have my commitment that WRDA 2020 implementation will be a priority and that we will complete the remaining implementation guidance documents and rulemakings. The Army is also making progress on key regulatory issues. Together, we are working closely with EPA to develop a durable definition of waters of the United States, informed by science, experience, and expertise to protect all interests dependent on clean water. The Army has also lifted the temporary pause on finalizing Section 404 permits in November 2021 and is working to resolve the vast majority of the outstanding jurisdictional determinations. The Army is also moving forward to coordinate with certifying authorities on water quality certifications that are potentially impacted by the recent vacatur of the 2020 Clean Water Section 401 rule. And with that, I look forward to answering any questions.
Ms. Connor, thanks so much. General Spellmon, you're on. Welcome. Thanks.
Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito and distinguished members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm honored to testify before you today with Mr. Connor. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss our execution of and your oversight of the Corps' Civil Works program. I look forward to discussing the status of implementation of recent Water Resources Development Acts, as well as questions the committee may have regarding anticipated legislation for 2022. Most importantly, I look forward to continuing to work with the committee, with Congress, and the administration to address the nation's water resources infrastructure needs. The infrastructure authorized by the Water Resources Development Acts and implemented by the Corps is critical for the nation's economic growth and for our national security. Ultimately, they benefit all American citizens. We greatly appreciate the committee's continuing commitment to enacting WRDAs on a 2-year cycle. This predictability has enabled critical water resources projects to be authorized for study and construction. This section has also provided regular updates to our authorities, modernizing our methodologies and enhancing flexibility in the policies we utilize to execute our missions. We maintain a dedicated commitment to our partners and value the engagement we have held with stakeholders to gain their input in shaping guidance for implementation of these authorities. While the focus of this hearing may be on the prospective legislation being considered by the committee, it's important for me to acknowledge the recent significant growth in the Corps' Civil Works program that we've experienced over the past several years. The challenge that we have for us in the Corps is that we are structured, we're organized, we're manned for what has historically been a $20 to $22 billion annual program. And that's the work, at Civil Works, that's the work we do for the VA, certainly the work we do for the Army and the Air Force and our combatant commanders in 110 countries around the globe today. Our current program is not $20 to $22 billion, it's $84 billion, and it's growing. Our Civil Works program has seen the greatest growth these past 5 years, going from a $7 billion annual budget to more than a $48 billion annual budget, and that's when you include all of the supplemental appropriations Congress has given us. So this funding provides the Corps with a once-in-a-generation window of opportunity to deliver water, resources, infrastructure, programs, and projects that will positively impact the lives of communities across this great nation. It's an opportunity that we are taking advantage of to transform our organization and our decision-making processes to safely finish quality projects on time and within budget. We are taking major steps to proactively identify risks to execute our mandates, then developing measures to reduce, resolve, or eliminate those risks. Measures such as accelerating recruitment through direct hiring authorities and transforming our workplace to attract and retain the top talent that will help us in fortifying our technical expertise to effectively develop and implement infrastructure projects. The Corps is also combining traditional and alternative delivery concepts that allow us to develop additional contracting tools that enhance our partnership efforts. By evolving our programs, our planning, and our operations, we are able to better address impacts from important drivers like global climate change. Additionally, the Corps continues to provide meaningful engagement opportunities for overburdened and underserved communities and Native American tribes to encourage and enable participation in decisions that impact their communities. The Corps does not accomplish anything by itself. We use our engineering expertise to address some of the most pressing water resource challenges we face as a nation today. My top priorities include identifying the highest priority investments and that we safely deliver quality projects on time and within budget. I strongly feel that to achieve this vision, we must execute a comprehensive research and development strategy to meet the challenges of the 21st century. We will accomplish this strategy with our partners in government, industry, academia, both nationally here in the United States and internationally. From climate change to warfighting, from overextended infrastructure to cybersecurity, there are no shortage of challenges that will require bold new research and development to solve. Thank you again, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
General Spellman, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your service over all these, how many years of service now?
35, sir.
But who's counting? You started out at what, 12?
Sir, I came on active duty in 1986.
All right. I think we're going to have start voting here in a very short while in the Senate. Let me just ask our staff, would somebody just check and make sure they're still going to kick it off at 3:30? And is it? Okay, good. And what I might do, Senator Capito, is just head over there right now. And I know you have another engagement. I'll vote, come back. And you can just keep things moving. Yeah, I know. I'm going to vote and come right back.
Okay.
And then you can vote and take care of that other engagement. With that, why don't you lead us off on the questions?
Okay. Do you want a question first?
No.
Oh.
I'll go later. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to go now.
Yeah, I'm going to go so I'll be there when they start voting.
Okay, then if you're asking me to go
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
I'm going to yield to Chairman Anahoff here to let him have my spot. Yes.
Good. Okay, thanks.
And then we'll go with Jen.
And just the order, I might mention the order. Senator Capito.
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Capito, Senator Cardin, Senator Inhofe, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Bozeman, Senator Stabenow. All right, thank you all. I'll be back shortly.
Okay, first let me thank Senator Capito for allowing this to take place in this order. And I've had occasion to spend some time with both General Spellman and Michael Connor, and we are in agreement on so many different things, and it's so important for my state of Oklahoma. I have to share with the rest of the people here how serious of a flood that we had in 2019. And the only ammunition that we had at that time was the Tulsa levee and West Tulsa levee system. This actually was at a time when it was put together. It was actually when I was 4 years old, and it far exceeded its service life. So we had the levee system, and when our flood came in 2019, more people, professionals, believed that we were going to be breaking the levee and having a really disastrous situation. And it did perform, and I can remember actually personally being down there when the water was coming through, and nobody thought that it was going to be able to hold. We put in emergency things right after that, and now we're in a situation that certainly Secretary Connor is familiar with. It's something that it is serious, and I know you are aware of the seriousness of this thing. So we have this levee system, and we are hoping that and doing everything we can to ensure that we're going to be able to hold this out in the event of another one. It was a close call, very close call. The other thing that I wanted to make sure I had time to mention is our MCARNs. You know, people don't realize that we're navigable in Oklahoma. We're the most inland navigable system in the country, and it's something that people don't realize that. And we have more miles of freshwater shoreline than any other of the 50 states. Now, there's a reason for that, because ours are all man-made lakes, and man-made lakes are they give you a lot of shoreline because they have a dam down here, and then they go across a lot of the. So people are not aware of, but that is something that's serious. The other thing that is of concern is that we are navigable in terms of having the capability to take care of what the things that we need. For example, our navigation way coming to the state of Oklahoma is 98% 12-foot channel. But that means that we have 2% that's not a 12-foot channel, it's a 9-foot channel. And that's one of the things that's been on our list for a long period of time. It's been authorized, and I just want to make sure that I take this opportunity, Mr. Connor, of reminding you of what you and I have talked about before and the seriousness of what we're facing now with these two projects. One being, of course, the levee system, that it would hold up for not another 100 years, but to start working immediately with the top priority. And I believe it has that, along with the deepening of the MCARNs. Would you share your thoughts on those two projects?
Senator Imhoff, thank you for the conversations regarding these projects and the ongoing dialogue. I mean, I think they represent two very high priority aspects of the overall Corps of Engineers program. That is, obviously, with respect to the levees, our need to maintain, rehabilitate, and do any new construction with an eye towards resilience, particularly given the 2019 flooding situation. We know what extreme events can bring, and so that brings a focus to the need to move forward with your project in West Tulsa. And then the inland waterways issue, the 12-foot navigation channel. I think during my confirmation process, I mentioned that I had looked up done some background in preparation for a talk with you, and I saw the Port of Tulsa, and I really was a little taken aback at the Port of Tulsa. But my first trip out of the box here was on the Mississippi River, Illinois River, seeing the dam and lock system, the navigable, talking to the folks involved in our navigable waterways, inland waterways, and moving commerce on that system, and the need for reliability, the benefits that exist from an efficient delivery cargo, and our need to maintain and improve that system so that it's continues to be an important part of our commerce system. That's part and parcel. That's one of our priorities, the supply chain, shoring up the supply chain. And so from that standpoint, I'm with you in the importance of those projects, sir.
Well, and I appreciate that very much. The last thing I would mention is on our lakes development. It seems like I never knew why it was this way, but it always seemed that they were always concerned with navigation and flood control, but not recreation. And we had so many great opportunities for recreation, and it's something that we have started looking at now for the first time. I was chairman, I guess, of this committee during the 07 WRDA legislation. We made some advancements at that time and again in 2020. But I would like to say that we've all changed on our priorities on the lake system that we have, and we recognize that recreation is a very important opportunity for us in our state of Oklahoma. And I would hope that you would agree that that's an area that we need to concentrate on for everyone's benefit.
Absolutely, Senator. I have a long history at the Interior Department, and I was delighted to hear when I came over in this position to find out that we have more campgrounds within the Army Corps of Engineers system than the National Park Service. So I understand the importance of that, particularly during the pandemic. We've seen how people have gone to recreate at federal facilities outdoors. It's an incredibly important part of the portfolio because it serves those communities in which we exist.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that, and thank you, Senator Capito.
Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and let me thank both of our witnesses for their work. Secretary Connor, as you can imagine, for a Maryland senator, the health of the Port of Baltimore is critically important. Maintenance dredging is absolutely essential. And when I first started in the House of Representatives many years ago, probably the greatest challenge was to find locations where we could put dredge material. But since we started Poplar Island, which became an environmental restoration as well as a location for dredge materials, we've overcome that controversy. And I appreciate our conversation that we had last year about Mid-Bay, which is the next scheduled location for environmental restoration, beneficial use of dredge materials, and to make sure that we can maintain our channels and have a location for the dredge material. You said very nice things about it back then. I just want to give you an opportunity to say now that we're ready to start actual construction, that this is a top priority of our regional delegation, and I would hope we'll receive your full support.
Senator Cardin, I'm not ready to make any announcements about any work plans that may be coming out here in the near future, but absolutely my time spent here in this position has only doubled down on my views of the benefits of the program that specifically that you're mentioning that's happening in the Chesapeake Bay, the beneficial use of that dredge material, the need to do more of that. It is something that we need to work through. We are doing it in your area. We need to take that knowledge and that partnership that we have and do that more in other places. And we need to work through those cost issues, I think, with the pilot projects that are moving forward, the 10 that we've selected, only partially funded at this point in time. We can demonstrate that, but I'm very impressed with the work that's been done in Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay, and it's something that we want to continue, absolutely, Senator.
So thank you very much for that. And we're on schedule, and in this appropriation cycle, if the work of our committees end up in an omnibus appropriation bill, there'll be additional support there for Mid-Bay to start construction. So I recognize your answer, and I thank you very much for your commitment, your support for beneficial use of dredge materials, where we are able to accomplish what we need to for dredging sites as well as an environmental progress. General Spellmon, I want to talk a little bit about Section 510 that was in the last WRDA Act. We substantially increased the authorization of Section 510 funding. It's a source that we looked upon as one of the most encouraging areas for restoration of the Chesapeake Bay and a lot of the work done in the Chesapeake Bay Partnership Program. Challenge is we've got to get it funded now that's authorized to get it into your work plan. Can you just share with us how we can work together to try to make sure that process moves forward consistent with the intent of Congress in the last WRDA bill?
Yes, sir. And I just want to start out by saying we appreciate the support of Congress. Last year in the $50,000 in 21 of reprogramming, we used that to complete the feasibility phase for Plum Creek and North City Park, Maryland project. Sir, we'd like to get that out of the work plan into a more predictable funding stream. As you just said, these are incredibly important projects for the ecosystem, for the Bay, and we just think there are great opportunities out there, and we'll continue to make our best technical recommendations to advance these type projects.
Great, and let's work together, because I know sometimes we run into the bureaucracy of the budget people and trying to get these funds flowing the way that we intended. So let's figure out a strategy that we can actually implement the programs that we intended in the last WRDA bill, and I thank you for your support. I want to use my remaining minutes to sort of support Senator Inhofe's point as it relates to, I'll call it the small harbors, or where we have recreational use. And these projects are numerous in our state and throughout, I think, our country. And we recognize it doesn't have the same degree of priority because of the economic impact isn't as direct as the major harbors are, but are critically important to smaller communities. And I would hope that as we look at the WRDA bill for 2022, Madam Chair, that we look at a way that we can make progress in dealing with some of the smaller projects, because communities really depend upon that, and we can really help the economic life of communities if we deal with some of the standards that are currently being used that make it very difficult to get these projects funded. So I just mentioned that, and I hope that we can work together, and I hope we can work with our leadership here to figure out a way to move those projects forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant Secretary Connor, last year we provided the Corps with more than $22 billion in additional appropriations with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the disaster supplemental from Hurricane Ida. Funding obviously is critical, but permitting approvals are not, if their permitting approvals are not issued in a timely fashion, these projects cannot move forward. Understanding how the Corps has used and continues to use those funds will help us understand what we need to do in the future. So I guess the first question is a very broad one, but a status of the spend plans for those funds, and what is the Corps doing to help streamline the permitting and environmental review process so that we can get these projects moving?
Absolutely. To start with part one, the question with respect to the spend plans, the work plans, I can assure you that I've been spending a good amount of my time since I've been in this position on those spend plans, I'm confident that we will meet the commitments that Congress set forth in passing IIJ in particular, and thinking that through in the context of the disaster supplemental as well as FY 2022 and the FY 2023 budget. So look forward to meeting those commitments, and I'll just express confidence that we're in a position to do that with respect to the funding plans. Moving on to the regulatory program, which you're exactly right, and there have been issues coming up in our regulatory program that I think about, and I know General Spellmon thinks about, in terms of we've got a lot of work to do, and so do a lot of other parties, and so we want to continue to promote, even in, quite frankly, a regulatory environment that's changing. We have changes in administration, we have court orders, and we have to respond and provide some regulatory certainty for potential permittees on how we can move forward and do the work that's necessary under the Clean Water Act in particular. And so we've done that. We've dealt with the court decisions that have vacated the navigable water protection rule, as well as the 401 certification processes. We've figured out and given guidance, folks, but overall, I would say that's part of the job, figuring out what we're going to do with decisions made in that interim period. We've done that too. We're not going to go back and revisit all decisions that were made. We are trying to move forward in the processes, but recognize that there may be new information that may warrant revisiting some of those determinations. That's just going to have to play out, and that's a conversation we need to have with the actual permittees. And so moving forward, we want to give clarity now so we can move forward with business, and then we want to engage, as we've talked about during my confirmation process, Waters of the U.S., the two-step regulatory process, rulemaking process that's been proposed. Let's go back to pre-2015 now. That's a familiar landscape. And then move forward with a very rigorous process to get to a durable rule that hopefully gets us out of this litigation cycle. And that's what I said during the confirmation process. I believe it even more strongly now.
Let me just ask a clarifying question. Are you saying that some of the permits that had already been granted under the previous administration could retroactively be revoked?
Not the previous administration. We're looking at the tenure of the rule itself. We're not looking at...
Under that rule, though, are you saying they could be revoked?
I think there is some legal risk that may exist.
So
not
that's-
because the Corps of Engineers is going to go back and assess legal risks, but I think permittees are looking at that. The rule was vacated, and that's new terrain for us. And so I think we all have to think through that from a regulatory, the agency perspective, as well as the permittee perspective. But we think in general, we have always held to the position that decisions made under the appropriate rules at that time are valid. We're not going to go back.
So you're not going to go back over those?
We are not.
Okay. I thought you were saying in some cases you might have to with new information and other things.
Well, there may be situations where we do that in consultation with the permittees because they may want to limit their legal risk.
Okay. Okay. Let me ask General Spellmon, in WRDA 2020, we talked about delivering projects that there was a provision defining economically disadvantaged communities. My understanding is the agency has not done that, so I want to know where the development of that definition is, and if you are following through with the directed language from that bill that said that you would use the economic distress criteria that EDA uses, and if you are following through on that directive, that you are using that as the definition, and where you are on this specific provision in the WRDA 2020.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. We are using the EPA tool to help us identify when we need data on minority.
The EDA?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Did you say EPA or EDA?
EPA, ma'am.
Once again, was it EDA or EPA?
Ma'am, the EPA tool.
Okay. So you're not using the EDA administration's statute that says that's how you use their economic distress criteria. Is that
Ma'am, so let me go back and
Yeah.
and follow up.
Sorry.
With you on that.
You're so far away, I can't tell the difference between a D and a P.
Now, I've seen both tools, and I've seen the application of the EPA tool on a number of regulatory actions. So I'll go back and follow up on the ADA. Man, we've been employing the Environmental Justice Executive Order since President Clinton released that in 1994. So I don't think we have a problem in identifying and going through that two-part test when we do our feasibility studies and when we do our construction projects. We're making recommendations to the Secretary. I would just briefly take you back to WRDA 18. We were asked to provide alternative metrics to the benefit to cost ratio that would better serve underserved communities, maybe communities in middle America that frankly the BCR does not serve very well.
Right.
We made a number of recommendations. We came up with a community equity modifier. And I just have not had a chance yet to walk Mr. Connor through the work that we did following 2018. What I'm saying is I don't think I have a staffing problem or we're not paying attention. I just think it's the metric that's used to grade our homework. We could probably have another conversation and make a stronger argument for alternative metrics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of these communities, and both members that had questioned talked about smaller communities that don't have capacity to be able to know how, when, and how to work these things, are economically advantaged, whether it's recreation or flood control or whatever. So we need you all to step in there. That's the intent, and hopefully that's what you'll move forward with. Senator Whitehouse by WebEx.
Yes. Thank you, Senator Capito. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I have a general question and then two Rhode Island specific ones. The general question has to do with the 2022 budget of the Army Corps for its flood and coastal damage reduction fund. Do you know what that number is? I'll break the silence and I'll tell you, it's $1.72 billion. Of that $1.72 billion, do you know how much is allocated for inland versus coastal?
I do not know the number specifically.
1.68 billion. If you do the math, the difference is $0.04 billion for coastal flooding, which is less than 3% of the number. Of your $1.72 billion, 97.7% will go inland. You do understand that part of the coastal damage that you're referring to, part of the climate risk that you refer to, is sea levels rising and worse coastal storms and resulting coastal flooding, correct?
Yes, Senator.
All right. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation about why 97.7% goes to inland and about 2.3% goes to coastal of that $1.72 billion. May I follow up with you on that so we're not taking all our time here?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Can you defend it quickly? Is there am I wrong, or should we have this conversation?
Well, I would just say I've begun digging into that. I know from a budgeting standpoint a little bit about why there's a discrepancy. I also understand that you have taken matters into your own hands with respect to IIJA, BBA 2018, to ensure that there is significant resources, and appropriately so, I would say. I'm applauding you for that effort, given storm surge, sea level rise, and the risks attendant on our coast, and that's going to give us the ability to move forward with projects.
Let me move on to two other things, and we'll keep working on that. The two things, one is, I just want to emphasize again the continuing importance to me of the Providence River Pilings removal project. The Army Corps is taking out an abandoned bridge. In that project, they're looking at taking out some pilings that are around it. In terms of the conversation we've had about smaller ports changing their use, the Providence port area, the Providence River around our capital city of Providence, it's no longer industrial. The pilings are long since abandoned. There are children in sailboats out trying to sail in that area. People try to fish and swim in that area, and the pilings are dangerous. I was told at one point by the Army Corps that you wouldn't take them out because they weren't a hazard to navigation because you could sail around them. In my view, something you have to sail around is the very definition of a hazard to navigation. So I just want to flag that for you to keep pressing. It's been years of trying to make some progress on this, and thank you for the little bit of progress we got related to the bridge and the immediately surrounding pilings, but there are other pilings to go. The second has to do with the Blackstone River, where it runs through Rhode Island. It comes down from Massachusetts, runs through Rhode Island. In the lower Blackstone, there are 4 dams that we're trying to fix. And we need fish passage in order to keep the environment working and allow the, what are they called, anadromous fish to get up the river. And you guys have a cost per fish analysis that it's very hard for us to meet because these are urban areas. These are downtown valuable areas. This goes back to the original Industrial Revolution of colonial days. And so we've got a lot of help that we need with those 4 dams. Could you assign someone to help us deal with the cost per fish ratio, which seems to create a real problem for small dams and also for dams that have been there a long time, so that fish passage is minimum because the dam itself has killed off the fish that would come for passage. But in time, with any luck and with proper fish passage, then that environmental resource will revive. So those are my 2 Rhode Island specific concerns.
Sir, I'll be real quick. I think we're going to be fine on the Blackstone River in terms of the metric, the ecological outputs. I'm confident we're going to make that. The challenge we're going to have here, you mentioned it, this is on some very difficult real estate. Cap Section 206 is capped at $10 million per project. We're probably looking, with what we know now, about a $20 million project on this real estate. So what we want to do is we'll finish our homework, sir, and then we'll come back to you with what options may be out there.
Okay. And don't forget those pilings. Thank you.
Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and General Spellmon, Assistant Secretary Connor, great to see both of you. Happy New Year. Thanks for being here to help us out. And Mr. Connor, you and I have had some, what I thought were delightful conversations leading up to your confirmation. I'm glad that you're confirmed and in front of us now and looking forward to working with you. I've especially respected and appreciated your really expertise on Western water rights issues and your understanding of them, and we'll be talking about them in a little bit. And General Spellmon, likewise, thank you. I've appreciated the last couple of years working with you. You've been very attentive to North Dakota and North Dakotans, and you've been very responsive to my concerns, and I've appreciated that partnership. In particular, General Spellmon, I've appreciated the work you did previously, a couple of years ago, on rescinding the real estate policy guidance number 26, and of course, then formally withdrawing the Corps' proposed surplus water rule. These were very positive steps, as both the rule and the guidance infringed upon states' rights in my view, complete contradiction to existing law. The Water Supply Act never authorized a one-size-fits-all rule to federalize the water appropriation authority that is specifically reserved for states. With that in mind, as we pursue now a new WRDA, I think we should consider setting up some sort of a venue or a commission that would allow states to have a platform to discuss and sort these issues out with the Corps. It would provide North Dakota and other Western states, especially, the forum to bring localized problems that they may be experiencing directly to you. In our previous conversations, General, you and I discussed the potential creation of such a venue, and through your feedback, you indicated that you want to make sure that we do not recreate another national policy, and believe me, I agree with you. Would you agree there would be some value, or could be some value, in Western states having an advisory board of some sort, or a commission to bring some of these more niche water issues to the Corps?
Sir, I absolutely always welcome feedback and engagement with states and with our partners and municipalities out on our waterways. As you know, I've been working hard to remove a number of what I have termed DC level obstacles to that conversation. You mentioned policy guidance letter number 26. We worked hard on the water supply rule. We had the secretary in the previous administration return the surplus water reports without action, and a number of other things. Sir, from a purely technical perspective, I would like to keep this at the local, regional level. I don't, and I say that just from my experience in the water supply rule. If I were to bring 3 states in this room today, I don't think I could get 3 states to agree on congressional terms like surplus water or natural flows. But I can get to solutions at the local level. And I did not want, so we're going to follow the direction of Congress. We're going to obviously honor state water rights. I just did not want to take a step back and start to re-centralize a committee where you have a person like me at the front of the room. I did not want to return to those days, sir.
Well, I rarely see value in another layer of bureaucracy myself, so I'm open to ideas. Maybe Mr. Connor, you could weigh in on the possibility of some sort of a venue. I do think, and you're very familiar with this, Western issues are unique and oftentimes are the consequence, the Western states are a consequence of some other region's policies, and that's my only reason for thinking about this. And I'm not committed to it, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Absolutely, Senator, and I've appreciated our discussions, and I think it's your terminology, a fellow policy geek. So I share that view and have enjoyed the discussions, and I think that's where this gets to is, as we discussed, and I think as General Spellmon alluded to, we need to look at every tool that we have with respect to water supply to address some of the challenges, particularly out west, where there's water scarcity across many basins. And so from that standpoint, how do we best figure out, we did this a long time with the Bureau of Reclamation. We set it up from the beginning, Section 8 of the Reclamation Act. Go to the states, get your permits, and work it out from there. That's not how the Corps developed its water resources project because they weren't developed for supply. So how do we get back to having that analysis to move forward and figure out how we can use these facilities or manage or operate these facilities in a way that enhances water supply? That's in watersheds, that's with the relevant states involved because they'll be driven by the need for solutions. And so I completely support what General Spellman said about the watershed and the local level, but there's an urgent need, I think, that you're trying to get at, and I think we can figure out how to meld the two to have this dialogue with the appropriate folks in the room.
No, I appreciate that. And as I wrap up, I just want to associate myself as well with some comments you made earlier in response to both Senator Inhofe and Senator Cardin about the smaller recreational opportunities. I mean, it is really quite remarkable how much recreational, facility you're responsible for at the Corps. And we're, in our water scarcity of the West, experiencing a drought right now that I know, if you've been out to Sakakawea before the freeze, there's going to be a lot of exposed infrastructure from previous droughts that needs to be rehabbed. I'm looking for creative ways that we can be helpful and that you can be helpful and multiple agencies can be helpful to make sure that regardless who the landlord is, that we actually grow the opportunity for enjoying the lake. But with that, I appreciate again both of you and yield.
Thank you. Senator Duckworth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assistant Secretary Connor, the America's, welcome, first of all. The America's Water Infrastructure Act, which was enacted in 2018, included my provision that requires the Corps to analyze federal policies that hinder the Corps' ability to address urban flooding. The previous administration committed to delivering this study to Congress by 2019, and unfortunately, it failed to meet its deadline and never delivered the report. Assistant Secretary Connor, will you commit to prioritizing the completion of this study as required under the 2018 WRDA reauthorization? And once completed, provide my office with a briefing on the results and to inform our efforts to strengthen the Corps' capabilities and capacity to address urban flooding?
Yes, Senator, I commit to following up and to prioritize getting the report and the information available to you. I think it fits within the idea that we're looking to figure out how we can address urban, disadvantaged communities, which are disproportionately affected. I think it fits in that area. So I know there's been a lot of work done on the report. I don't exactly know where it is in the process, but it's on my radar screen now, and it's a priority, I guess, on the commitment I just made.
Okay, well, I mean, it was due in 2019, so I hope that it's a priority item. Do you think, well, you may not know, do you think it can be completed and release this study by the end of this month?
I don't know that it'll be available by the end of this month, but I will definitely get back with you and your staff as far as timing and ensure that I'm doing what I can to break it free, Senator.
Thank you. And this next question is for both witnesses. It is about urban flooding and disadvantaged communities. The Corps manages a significant amount of our nation's infrastructure, and communities depend on the Corps to implement projects that will help protect them from harmful flooding and natural disasters. We've already heard about this today. We need to do this without worsening pollution problems, because many Corps projects are located near or directly impact low-income communities, both urban and rural, and communities of color. It is critical that the Corps has a staff capacity to achieve multiple goals for these communities. These goals include, I feel, the prioritizing recovery efforts, minimizing adverse impacts of projects, and collecting and integrating input from communities, experts, and other stakeholders to improve current policies and practices. Lieutenant General Spellmon and Assistant Secretary Connor, would each of you describe how the Corps would benefit from Congress taking action to authorize some form of an advisory committee to support the Corps' environmental justice efforts to better serve marginalized and disadvantaged communities? And also, would the Corps consider prioritizing environmental justice initiatives across the agency by elevating an official to specifically advise leadership on this topic? So how do you feel about an advisory committee? And would you elevate somebody and pin the rose on them to be in charge of environmental justice, marginalized, disadvantaged communities?
Yes, with respect to an advisory committee, I think the idea of getting input to ensuring that we're having communications with those communities and their representatives about how we can best address the risks that they're facing, that's part of a dialogue that we should be having overall. And from that standpoint, and given the administration's focus on that, I am definitely open to the idea of an advisory committee. We can have a dialogue. Quite frankly, we rely on that, and as we move forward and we, implement the procedures and the requirements to look at how we can benefit disadvantaged, marginalized communities, we are going to look to those communities to help best inform us. But if there are, an overarching dialogue that we should be part of, I am supportive of that, absolutely. And we are going to need somebody, and we're going to have to, socialize this throughout the organization, through the Corps, and I know General Spellmon has been working with this because we've talked about this with respect to addressing environmental justice needs within the projects and the activities that we undertake, and certainly take it under advisement, the idea of elevating somebody with that specific responsibility. But even then, that's just a start. We need to integrate this throughout the organization. General Spellmon.
Senator Duckworth, I would just add, we're never going to say no to advice. We're never going to say no to more staff expertise, and I would welcome both of these initiatives.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
I think Senator Sullivan is next.
Thank
Senator
you,
Sullivan, I see you. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you.
Well, I want to follow up, gentlemen, and good to see both of you. Very quickly, just on this issue of environmental justice, marginalized communities, as my good friend Tammy Duckworth, Senator Duckworth mentioned. It's not been you guys yet, it better not be, but the Biden administration continues on their actually targeting of marginalized communities in my state. Just on Monday, we had, Mr. Chairman, our 21st executive action targeting solely the great state of Alaska, 21st, very negative for our state. And the Inupiat community leaders of the North Slope put out a press release. Great Americans who don't, this is a press release in some ways it's out of character because they're so angry. Mr. Secretary, they're so angry because they're being attacked. Native Americans, marginalized community, environmental justice BS that you hear from this administration all the time. Here's just a couple quotes. This is when they took 50% of the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, set aside by Congress for energy development, 50% off the table, going all the way back to President Obama. Not based on science, radical environmental groups. So here's the Inupiat leadership of my state. All this baloney about environmental justice, marginalized communities, we really care about helping the most downtrodden communities. It's baloney, it's bullshit. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but it is. Here's the chairman of ASRC. On multiple occasions, ASRC, the borough, and the tribe have offered to work in partnership with the Biden administration on issues affecting our region, the North Slope borough, bigger than California, by the way. Secretary Holland and President Biden have chosen, with this decision, not only to ignore the voices of the North Slope Inupiat, Native Americans, but to exclude us from the decision-making process on issues that impact our Inupiat communities and our culture. Here's the Inupiat leader of the Arctic Slope region. Secretary Holland has violated her department's consultation guidance by failing to consult with the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope. That's a tribe. We are a federally recognized tribe, and this action directly impacts the livelihoods of our tribal members. This is further proof that the Biden administration prioritizes its relationships with environmental organizations over the sovereignty of Alaska Natives. Here's the North Slope Borough Mayor, Harry Brower, a Inupiat leader. I have a responsibility to the people of the North Slope to protect the long-term sustainability of communities through a viable economic base, a responsibility I take seriously for the Native people of my state. Secretary Holland is failing in her responsibility to the Alaska Native people of the North Slope. Mr. Secretary, it goes on and on and on. And all this baloney about environmental justice, we want to take care of disadvantaged communities. Guess what? There's a huge exception in the Biden administration, and it's not for Alaska Natives. We'll target them. We'll make sure we crush their economic opportunities. Can I get both of your commitments not to do this? 21 executive actions smashed in my state. There's no other state in the country that's getting this kind of bullshit focus on shutting down Alaska, ignoring the Native people, and then they go to the media and say, oh, we care about the disadvantaged communities of America. That's a bunch of baloney. Not in my state, they don't. Mr. Secretary, you and I have talked about this. I'm sorry. I am so angry about this. You haven't done it yet. General, you haven't done it yet. I sure hope you don't. Do you have any response? Or can I just get your commitment? Don't do this to my state. If Joe Biden had a Republican administration that came in on year one and issued 21 executive actions against Delaware, he would be as mad as I am.
Senator Sullivan, I can assure you that environmental justice and working with marginalized communities is not baloney to me. I don't believe it's baloney to the administration.
But as long as they're not as long as they're in disadvantaged communities in Alaska, then they get targeted. Just commit to me to not do
my
that.
commitment that I'm going to work with the Native communities in Alaska. I talked to Mayor Brower a few weeks ago about some needs that are up there on the North Slope. It's an ongoing dialogue. We're going to try and serve those communities as I think they're being served across the country.
Well, I want to work with both of you on whether it's the Port of Nome, what's going on in Barrow. We had General Gibbs, who was up in Barrow with me this summer, who did a great job, General. I'm sorry, I love the Corps. I think both of you are very qualified. This is just
Senator's time has expired.
very difficult for my constituents to have to deal with. And I think it's unfair, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to have a hearing on this. This administration targeting one state with shutdown. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to submit questions for the record.
Very good. My staff, I'm going to recognize Senator Markey next, but I've just handed a note by my senior staff person on water issues that the issue being raised here regarding the tribes, this particular issue is an issue that's under the Energy and Natural Resources Committee and under the Interior Department. Let's talk about it afterwards. Okay.
I acknowledge.
There we go. Thank you. All right, Senator Markey, your turn. Thanks for your patience.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. The Sagamore and the Bourne Bridges, also known as the Cape Cod Canal Bridges, connects the nearly 250,000 residents of Cape Cod to the rest of Massachusetts. And these structures are essential routes for general transportation, tourism, and evacuations in case of an emergency. which is more important than ever as Cape Cod faces the existential threat of climate change. It is right in the crosshairs, and the only way off of Cape Cod are these two bridges in the event that a Hurricane Sandy-like event occurs. The Army Corps has ably owned and maintained the Cape Cod bridges since 1935, but unfortunately, they are now more than 85 years old and are in desperate need of replacement. And that's why I fought so hard to make sure that our recent bipartisan infrastructure law could provide the resources we need to replace both bridges. First, we gave Massachusetts and the Army Corps a huge increase. My state, Massachusetts, is now poised to receive more than $9 billion in direct federal infrastructure funding over the next 5 years, including $1.1 billion for bridge replacement and repair. And the Army Corps has also received more than $17 billion in new funding for the next 5 years. And second, I also helped working with the chairman to make sure that the bipartisan infrastructure law includes nearly $35 billion in competitive grant opportunities that can now be targeted for the Cape Cod bridges. Assistant Secretary Connor, we've talked extensively about this project, and I appreciate your support that you've expressed in private. So I just hope at this moment, in a public hearing, that you would commit to advancing this bridge replacement effort in Massachusetts. Do you agree that the infrastructure law provides a path forward and sufficient funding opportunities to replace the Cape Cod bridges?
Absolutely, Senator Markey. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the dialogue that we had over the holidays on this particular issue. I think absolutely the IIJA does provide the opportunity and the resources for us to move forward in the bridge project. As we discussed, I think it's going to be an interagency, interdepartmental partnership that's going to get this done. We're working with the Department of Transportation. Even with the very productive conversations we had before you and I spoke, we've had ongoing conversations, and I had discussions with leadership at the Department of Transportation on this effort. So I think we're executing the game plan that we talked about. We're moving forward in those next steps that we discussed. So absolutely, we'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, very much. And again, IIJ, for anyone listening, the other name for the program.
Bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Yeah, the other name for that is Cape Cod Bridges Bill. Okay, so it's translated into English in Massachusetts. And will you commit to ensuring that the Army Corps applies all of the grant programs it can to complete the essential project, including opportunities that can be pursued in collaboration with Massachusetts?
Absolutely. We are looking at all opportunities. We have strong incentive to do that.
I thank you, Mr. Secretary. And another issue facing Massachusetts is the growing threat of more flooding, coastal erosion, and extreme storms, all of which are supercharged by human-caused climate change. Far too many communities in my state are already experiencing the devastating impacts of coastal erosion on their beaches, homes, and businesses, from Plum Island up in Newburyport down to Chatham, Revere, Winthrop, and more. Flooding, sea level rise, and extreme storms are also dire threats for communities like Boston and Chelsea and others that are potentially environmental justice communities. We're fighting every day to make sure that the climate crisis is not an extinction-level event for eastern Massachusetts. But we have to prepare to respond to the unavoidable and inevitable impacts. There is a program that the Army Corps has, the Storm and Hurricane Restoration and Impact Minimization Program, through which the Corps can respond. Secretary Connor, would you agree that this program's funding should be increased in order to ensure the Army Corps can keep pace with the growing threat of climate change?
Senator Markey, I'm not familiar specifically with this program. Looking at the totality of the needs out there and going through our work plan process and understanding that need, we need to invest more in resilience. There's no question about it, given all the factors that you just enunciated. General Spellmon, I don't, with respect to the specific program you may have.
No, sir, exactly. Would certainly support that. And then also, sir, we appreciate Congress's support of the Boston Regional coastal storm risk management study. It gave us a new start in '21. We're going to make our best technical argument for funding if we're offered a '22 work plan to move out on that effort.
And I thank you, and that's why, Mr. Chairman, I want to work with you in the next WRDA bill, the next water resources bill, so that we have the capacity to provide the resources to these great public servants so that they can provide the protection for those very valuable resources along our coastlines that otherwise are going to be in great jeopardy. So I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank both of you for being great public servants as well.
Thanks, Senator Marcus. Thanks a lot for joining us and for your passion on these issues. I remember that bridge. I remember the conversation about that bridge. We have, I think, Senator Stabenow is on her way back to her office to join us remotely. And Senator Kelly, why don't I recognize you? And is she here?
Hello, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Oh, great. All right, Debbie, go right ahead. Then we'll turn to Senator Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, as we're all juggling various things. Thank goodness for being able to do some of this virtually. And I'm very enthused about working with you on the next WRDA bill. And to Mr. Connor and Mr. Spellmon, thank you for your leadership on these really important issues. You know, it's hard for me to think of a single piece of infrastructure more consequential to our economy than the Soo locks up in the UP, where, as you know, right now we only have one large lock that will handle freighters, barges coming through from the St. Lawrence Seaway, carrying materials, carrying finished products, and so on, that go not only all around the Great Lakes region, but really all around the country. And during my recent visit, I asked the officials from the Detroit Army Corps what impact front-loading all of the funding, the entire funding, so they could do the long-term contracts that are needed to get this thing completed. So heaven forbid we don't have a shutdown of the one lock working and really a disaster economically. But what impact front loading would have on completing the project. And I was really pleased to hear, the good news is that if we provide all the funding up front now for certainty and they can do the contracts, we can expedite its completion by up to 2 years and potentially up to $200 million. And so it seems like this would be the prudent, efficient, responsible thing to do. And so following the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, I led a letter along with 7 of our Great Lakes senators to the administration supporting the portion of the Corps' new construction to fully fund the Soo Locks project. So given the importance of the project to the Great Lakes region, to the national economy as a whole, can I count on the Corps to give very serious consideration to this request?
Absolutely, giving it very, very strong consideration, important, strategic. As I've looked into it after we had our initial discussion about the Soo locks, the reliance on that system and the lack of redundancy that exists, it's concerning. It's one of those things that you do wake up in the middle of the night thinking about. And so from that standpoint, strong consideration, absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, heaven forbid we would see a Suez Canal type situation where it's blocked and we can't move forward. So, and speaking of high stakes core projects, I want to also talk again about the Brandon Road Lock and Dam project to install comprehensive measures to stop invasive carp from entering the Great Lakes. This is of interest to a number of us on the committee and off the committee. An event that would result in irreparable damage to the Great Lakes. Despite the gravity of the threat, this project has not progressed nearly quick enough. These fish just keep coming, whether we're completing this project to stop them or not. We authorized the feasibility study as part of WRDA in 2007. This has been a bipartisan effort. We expedited its completion as part of the 2012 highway bill, and today we still have 3 years remaining on the pre-construction engineering and design. The CARP are continuing to swim up the Mississippi River and the Illinois River. They're not waiting for us to get this thing done. So while I appreciate the Corps' diligence, the pace at which it moves in adopting innovative solutions across it carries its own risk. I mean, I realize these are new solutions that you've come up with, but there's been such caution and slowness on it. I'm very concerned. So how is the Corps working to become more responsive to these sorts of pressing threats, especially as we look forward to a whole slew of new and unprecedented challenges as a result of the climate crisis?
Senator, this is General Spellman. I would tell you this has our full attention, and I acknowledge it will never be fast enough. But as you outlined, we absolutely have to get the engineering right. We are dealing with new technologies we have not put on a structure of this size before: CO2 curtains, acoustic barriers, light deterrents. We appreciate Congress has been generous, and as is the President's budget, to give us all the money we need and can put to work with our best engineers and architects that are going very hard on the design for this project. Ma'am, you have my commitment. We'll work to get out of design as quickly as possible and get to construction.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Stabenow, thank you for joining us remotely as we work through this afternoon, this series of votes. Next, I understand Senator Ernst is here. Yes, she's here. Senator Ernst, nice to see you. And then Senator Kelly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to you both for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here. General Spellman, always great to see you. I know you've worked so hard on a number of projects throughout Iowa, and we're greatly appreciative. In December, Senator Grassley led a bipartisan letter that I had signed, and it stated the importance of the Navigation and Ecosystem Sustainability Program, so NESP, and asking if it gets prioritized in the Corps' upcoming work plan. Iowa has approximately 85,000 farms, 95% of which are family-owned. As we work to make American farm exports more abundant around the world, we also need to maintain a strong and efficient inland waterways navigation system. Of the 20 most recent new starts for the inland waterways system, only one was in the upper Mississippi River Basin. So, Mr. Secretary and General, can you make any assurances today that NESP, specifically for me, Lock and Dam 25, will be prioritized in the upcoming Corps work plan?
Senator Ernst, thank you for the question and raising the issue. It's being given strong consideration as part of the work plan process. As I noted earlier, I was out, one of my first trips out of the box was on the Mississippi and up in the Illinois River, and become familiar with the users of the inland waterway system. And I recognize from that meeting and the explanations, the importance from an agricultural perspective, the supply chain as a whole, in and out, reliability of the system, that's certainly part of that process. So as directed by Congress, we will be making substantial investments. We're following the capital investment strategy, and it's going to get strong consideration.
Okay, and General Spellman?
Yes, ma'am. So we're making best use of the $5 million that Congress gave us in the 21 work plan to advance the design for Lock and Dam number 25, adjacent mooring cells, and of course there's a correlated ecosystem restoration project. We want to make sure when the administration makes its decision that we're absolutely ready to go to construction. These are important projects.
Very important projects. I appreciate your commitment, and if we need to make any further discussion opportunities in the future, let me know. I'm happy to visit with both of you, but it is a priority for us, so thank you very much for that. Certainly one of the priorities for the WRDA 2022 would require the Corps to submit a report to Congress listing all projects that are either $100 million over budget or 5 years behind schedule. So again, that's a priority I have for WRDA 22. Unlike in the private sector, there are no clear incentives for federal agencies to deliver projects on time or on budget. General Spellman, what kind of incentives do you think that agencies might respond to? What do you think would be effective?
Yes, ma'am. I professionally disagree that we don't have any incentives. There are firms out there that build big box stores, and they do it every day, and they get very good at it over and over. And there are firms out there that build high-rise apartments, and they do it every day, every year, and they get very good at it. I don't have two projects that are alike in the Civil Works program. Cedar Rapids is very different from Texas Coastal. It's very different from what we're dealing with down in Miami. And that's the beauty of why folks want to come to the Corps, because they're working on national level infrastructure that's all different. They're not building Walmarts. And that's why I think that the engineers and the talent that we have in the Corps are recognized nationally throughout the year on national level awards. And many of them are recognized, ma'am, internationally for the work that they do. And we work on, again, projects that are of national significance, both here in the United States and today in 110 countries around the world.
And yes, I would agree. I think we have a phenomenal Corps that does a great job, tremendous engineers. But what we do end up with are a lot of projects that end up behind schedule or over time. Cedar Rapids, of course, additional dollars will be needed for that particular project. So how can we do better with that?
Yes, ma'am. You absolutely have our commitment and how we want to do better. So for the Cedar Rapids, yes, we have some cost growth. Ma'am, I'll go back to the beginning of Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. This was not unexpected, given the level of feasibility we had done on this particular project and several others. We knew this cost growth was coming. We just didn't know where. So we have, in this case, we have adequate contingency in our non-Harvey Irma Maria states to adequately cover the cost growth. Again, it was expected, we're planning for it, and we're committed to finishing that project.
Well, and we are extremely pleased that you have been engaging with Cedar Rapids and so many of the other projects as well, and we hope that we can continue working on this, Lock and Dam 25. Let's, try and get that going as well, but I really appreciate your time and your attention to so many of these projects, and hopefully we can see many of them completed in the near future. Thank you. I yield.
All right, Senator, it's great to see you. And now, patient, long-waited Senator Kelly. And Senator Bozeman, you follow on the heels of Senator Kelly. And then I understand that we're going to have another vote back over in the Senate later today. It's an interesting afternoon. All right, Mark, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to both Secretary Connor and General Spellman for joining us today. As we begin drafting the 2022 WRDA bill, it's important to me that we ensure the Army Corps of Engineers has the authorities and the resources necessary to respond to the drought that's facing Arizona and other western states. And as the bill moves through the Senate, I'm hopeful that we can work together to ensure a whole government approach to respond to this severe drought. It's not like anything we've seen in our lifetimes. It's been going on 22 years now. It's significant. Secretary Connor, as a former commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, I know you know the importance of these issues, so I'd like to start my questions with you. As you know, the 2020 WRDA bill authorized a new Section 595 Western Infrastructure Program in Arizona, which allows localities in Arizona to receive funding for a variety of water and wastewater projects. What updates can you share about the Corps' work to stand up and fund this program, and how do you think a program like this can help Arizona adapt to changing drought conditions?
Senator Kelly, thank you for the question. As you and I discussed, I understand from that prior service, Arizona is at the epicenter of drought in the Colorado River Basin and facing shortages to the supply that it's long relied on. And I think the environmental infrastructure program, so we've already started funding. Pasco Yaqui Tribe, I believe, got about $1 million to move forward with water supply pipeline. I think that's one aspect, but in the dialogue that you and I have had and with others, I also understand there's about $70 million of identified projects already. And that's a good thing. We have a whole of government approach. I know the Interior Department has a lot of responsibilities and resources that it will be applying to the Colorado River system, but we can do our part in working with your communities who are developing innovative strategies under that environmental infrastructure program. managed aquifer recharge, reuse activity. So we will look forward to trying to work with the resources we have, and there were additional resources within the IIJA for environmental infrastructure. And I know it's been part of the congressionally directed spending in past appropriations bills, so we will put that to good use whenever we can to help address these resource issues. And I think even in our overall programs that we're undertaking in Arizona, looking at how we integrate flood protection and water supply and look for opportunities for multi-benefits is going to be a key part of what we do moving forward.
You think this will help us deal with the drought situation we're facing?
I think it's an absolute critical part of the drought situation is that, there's always going to be some reliance on the Colorado River, but having these local strategies developed through the water supply and reuse and wastewater projects that we're talking about and flood control, I think that's the future. It needs to be.
So broadening this out a little bit, do you believe that the Corps' main authorities for flood risk management, ecosystem restoration, and water supply are sufficient to allow the Corps to play its part in responding to drought conditions in the western United States?
I think I'm going to have to look into that more closely. I know we have authorities to engage in projects and activities, whether they're long-term enough, whether they've got the right parameters to ensure we're looking at this. I think we have the discretion to do that, but that'll be an ongoing dialogue, and I'll get with you and your staff on
That's
that.
what I'd like you to do. So if there are additional authorities which the Corps could benefit from to address water supply issues unique to the western United States, if you could get us that information and General Spellman, the same for you, that would be incredibly helpful. And we'll work with both of you to make sure that within, if it makes sense to get you the authorities that you need.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Senator Kelly, and we've been rejoined by Senator Bozeman. Good to see you, my friend, and you're recognized. Thanks for joining us twice.
Thank you as always, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate the hearing today. Thank you all for being here. And then also, General Spellman, Secretary Connor, we appreciate you. We appreciate the administration for their support of the President's 2022 budget request for the Three Rivers Navigation Project. This is something that's essential to the river. If it fails, then it's not a question of if, it's when. Then it would, severely make it such that essentially the Arkansas River would shut down, which would be a real impact not only to the state of Arkansas, but our entire economy. So I do appreciate you having the foresight to address it before it becomes a crisis. In regard to, I've got a couple questions. Congress authorized the deepening of the MCARNs in 2003, and work on the 12-foot deepening project was initiated in 2006 using funds appropriated in 2005. However, the project has been inactive since then. I understand pre-construction engineering design funds. This is something that we've been working with Senator Inhofe and the Arkansas delegation, the entire Arkansas delegation, Oklahoma delegation. But I understand pre-construction engineering design funds will be required in fiscal year 22 and 23 for resumption of the deepening project. What are the capability figures for pre-construction engineering and design for the Tulsa and Little Rock districts for fiscal year 22 and 23?
Sir, General Spellman, I'll take that. Sir, we're going to express a capability for $10 million. There is some more design work, but I also want to share with you that we're thinking proactively here. We're combining some already funded O&M work for bank stabilization and rock placement that we need to do, but that's also going to serve us well when we move forward with the deepening.
Very good. The final question has to do with the levee safety provision that was enacted as part of the Water Resources Development Act of 2020. Section 131 of WRDA directs the Corps to do three things with the individual levee sponsors for systems in the federal portfolio. Identify project-specific engineering and maintenance deficiencies, if any, describe recommended remedies and the associated cost of these remedies, consult closely with the non-federal sponsor throughout the process. We were part of leading this. And the problem is, we have a situation where we all agree you've got a levee that really is very well maintained. But it's a catch-22 situation in the sense that with your grading structure, it's not recognized as that. And then you say, well, how can I fix this? You know, what can I do to get it up to the level? And there's simply no answer. So this is something that we have to get fixed. It's, you know, we've got excellent levees, not only in Arkansas, but throughout the country with this minimally, you know, acceptable rating, which is simply, you know, it's not good.
Sir, I know we're going back in working with the public on this. I know one of the pieces that we've received a lot of feedback on is how we're defining risk, right? It's a probability at times a consequence. And the probability, of course, is what you described, the state of the levee, the structure of the levee, how sound is it? It's the consequence, right, if that were to fail. And we were using that as a metric to help the secretary make informed decisions with limited funds, right? You can't go out and fix everything. So let's use this risk metric. We're going to circle back on this, sir. We've got more communications to do with experts in your state and throughout the country on how we can better communicate this and find a way forward.
Yeah, I again, and we need to do that in a timely fashion. The other problem, you know, we have had on the Mississippi, our various waterways, we've had these massive floods, these centuries floods. That's a great stress test, you know, for areas that have held up with no problem at all. You know, what better measurement is there, you know, that they're capable of doing? See what I'm saying? The other side is that you all can be very proud. You know, you've designed a system that really has done well, and we can be very proud of that. But we've got some problems in administering. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys very much.
Senator Bozeman, thanks as always for joining us and for your thoughtful questioning. I have a series of questions I'd like to ask of Secretary Connor and General Spellmon. Before I do, just almost on a personal basis, Mr. Connor, you've been in this new job for how long now?
Senator, I think it's 6 weeks now.
All right. Does it seem longer?
No, it's actually just one long day, it seems like, since that time.
All right. Just take a minute and reflect on your new responsibilities, what you'd expected, what you've found, what are you encouraged by, maybe what are you challenged by. Just take a few minutes on that, and then I have some other prepared questions.
Senator, I appreciate the question. I am taken aback about the level of respect across, on a bipartisan basis, across regions of this country, the work that the Army Corps of Engineers does and the importance that it has to many, many communities. There's obviously a lot of issues all the time, but I think people have made it clear to me they take a step back and they look at the totality of what the Corps does in their communities, and they appreciate that work. And it's resonated with me how important this organization is. The expectations are daunting with respect to the need that exists. And you've identified a great number of things that we should be working on, particularly in a climate-impacted world. And the enormity of the task ahead of us is daunting, to say the least. But I'm confident. I feel very fortunate to be working with the folks that I get to work with and to have a role in this organization. And to be charged with responsibilities that Congress and members like you have for this organization. And I think it's a great partnership, and I think we can do a lot of great work, but we have the weight of expectations of execution too. And so it's not about just thinking about it, talking about it, having good intentions. It's about execution and moving forward, and we're working on the whole range of that portfolio.
All right, good. I think you partly answered this, but when we passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill that this committee provided the foundation for on the water side, drinking water, wastewater, flood issues, and on the surface transportation side, the roads, highways, bridges issues as well. The first part of getting that money out to the states, put it to work, has been done. We don't come together on a lot of big issues on a bipartisan basis these days, but we did pass on a strong bipartisan basis the comprehensive bipartisan infrastructure legislation. And the second challenge is to make sure the money gets out the door, being put to use, good use. And I think that's beginning to be done. The second thing is we want to make sure that people in this country know what's happening and that we don't hide our candle under a bushel, and that we let them know what we're doing, how that money is being put to good use to improve their quality of lives, and also to frankly strengthen our economy and economic vibrancy of our country. Thank you for those reflections. Again, we're delighted that you're interested in this job. The president nominated you, and grateful to our colleagues for confirming you. This is a question for General Spellmon and for you, Mr. Connor. Gentlemen, as leaders of the Corps, you understand the importance of the Biennial Water Resources Development Act legislation probably better than anybody around. As you know, it not only authorizes projects and spending limits for the Corps, but it sets new authorities and new priorities. Now that we're starting development of the 2022 WRDA, I'd like to take this opportunity here from both of you today about key changes, priorities or authorities that the Corps needs to be a better partner with non-federal stakeholders. And Mr. Connor, why don't you take that, lead off with that, and then we'll kick it over to General Spellmon.
Senator Carper, absolutely. So thinking about how we can best use this WRDA 2022 process, I think General Spellman may have some specific ideas that we've discussed. I want to talk a little bit more broadly. We are going to be moving forward in the direction of WRDA 2020 and doing agency-specific guidelines with respect to agency-specific procedures with respect to the principal requirements and guidelines, which is going to be looking at our projects and comprehensive benefits associated with those projects, not just focused on national economic development. What are regional benefits? What are local benefits? What are environmental and social benefits? And how we integrate that into our decision-making. As part of that, we also want to ensure we're looking at certain features of our projects, that we're looking and expecting that we at least assess natural nature-based features, and that we integrate them wherever we can. So it's going to be a pretty significant undertaking. We're going to be moving forward with that process. And how we take those ideas and those disclosures and that discussion and turn it into practice is something that we should all be looking at as to whether that requires new authorities or modification of authorities about how we assess and how we choose and select projects. So I think that's a heads up for the process that you directed, and I think it's one that we should keep in touch on because it may yield the need for new authorities. Second, as we've talked about here today, with respect to environmental infrastructure, continuing authority programs, communities across the country are making great use of those programs. And I naively thought a year ago that they were underutilized programs that had a lot of capability. Now I know they're oversubscribed programs with respect to the need. You all obviously understood that in providing the resources in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So how we make use of those authorities, thread them into the needs, and maybe expand their use, I think is something that we ought to think about together. And then lastly, I would just note how we do business and how we create the efficiencies to make investments in the best use of our resources is going to be an ongoing issue, particularly with the size of the portfolio that General Spellman mentioned in his opening statements, the expectations not just for the Civil Works program, but our Civil Works folks support other activities. So contracting efficiencies, something even like the plant replacement improvement program, WRDA 2016 might have put a little bit of process in there that maybe we want to discuss about more flexibility to use at least some low dollar funds. We understand the need for oversight about how we use funds directly to address some of our plant maintenance and replacement needs. But maybe we can talk a little bit about some flexibility with respect to that in looking back to the changes made in 2016 WRDA. Those are three ideas that I'll throw out, but I know General Spellman has some more.
Yes, sir. Just, first of all, a general statement on your comment on partnership. I do have, I tell myself, I have a consistency problem. I have districts that do partnering and have partnerships, and they do this very well. And I have some that don't do it very well at all. And we are working every day. This is one of our 4 priorities to level
Why do you suppose, excuse me, why do you suppose some do it well and some don't do it well at all? Any idea? Can you generalize on that?
Ma'am, sir, it's younger staff. It's inexperienced commanders coming to the Corps for the first time. So we just published new guidelines. We have not published doctrine on this since 1993. So we have new guidelines out, and we're working on a partnering playbook that we will publish this year. And so there's an education component to this. There is a sharing of best practices component to this as well. And we're working on this very hard. Sir, with respect to WRDA 22, a couple things. First of all, again, on partnership, I would like to see a reauthorization of the Tribal Partnership Program. This came to us, it was authorized in 2000, it sunsets in 2024. We've completed a number of very good studies under this program. We've completed one very good construction project up in South Dakota. I would like to see Congress reauthorize this program so we can take these studies and move them into good construction projects. So I'd like to have the ability to assign warrant officers and non-commissioned officers to my civil works projects. I mentioned the massive workload. Today I have 800 military men and women in the Army Corps of Engineers. The rest are very talented civilians. But I can't bring in all those captains and majors because of other priorities for engineer officers elsewhere in the Army. But I have non-commissioned officers with degrees in project management. I have warrant officers with master's degrees in electrical engineering, and I would love to be able to assign them to civil works projects. It's the 56 Flood Control Act that limits me to commissioned officers only. And then, sir, Secretary Connor mentioned it. I would just, if we could have a discussion and maybe gain some flexibility, it's Section 160 of WRDA 2016 that puts some governance on top of my plant replacement improvement program. I have to publish a perspective each year for those projects. So these are types of projects where out in the field I store equipment, or I have a field office. And they're small generally small projects, 7 to 8 million. I have not had a project approved or we've moved forward on since the implementation of this provision. And so I would just like to have the ability where maybe Secretary Connor had an approval level where I could go to him and get approval for an $8 million project to replace a building that burned down in Portland, for example, this past summer. Anyway, I would like just to offer a conversation on that one, sir, and would welcome any flexibility we could get.
All right, thank you. Aside from what you've just said, are there any other key issues you'd like to see addressed that come to mind in the coming WRDA bill? You've touched on a number of them, but anything else anything else you'd like to mention before I turn the
Sir,
page now?
I'll mention one more, and it goes back, we mentioned it earlier, the Hurricane Storm and Damage Risk Reduction System in New Orleans is a section 3017 from WRDA, going all the way back to WRDA 18, and that allows us to account for subsidence and settlement in the levees and the flood walls in and around New Orleans. That authority expires in 2024, and I think we would like to keep that system intact and keep it whole, and for Congress to reconsider extending reauthorizing that authority as well.
Okay, good. Next question. I think this would just be for you, Mr. Connor, and deals with collaboration with, especially with stakeholders. Stakeholders and sponsor collaboration with the Army Corps of Engineers, as you know, is critical to solving today's water resources challenges. It helps to limit the cost of missed opportunities, promotes better planning, provides better transparency, and results in more fiscally and, I think, environmentally sound projects. The Corps, unfortunately, has been limited in its outreach, particularly in disadvantaged communities. In addition, the Corps has still not completed implementation guidance on the disadvantaged community provisions contained in WRDA 2020. Question. First, actually a two-part question. First, when do you think we can expect the disadvantaged community guidance that Congress has required? And second, what more should the Corps be doing to collaborate with non-federal stakeholders, including those in disadvantaged communities? Will you take on those two questions, please?
Absolutely, Senator Carper. It's a great question. I think we need to, it's going to be a priority here now, as I committed to in my opening statement, moving forward with the guidance and getting the right definitions of disadvantaged communities, economically challenged communities, we need to just make a decision, and that'll, set us in a position to finish the guidance, particularly because we have resources in the IIJA, specifically the $30 million that was carved out to move forward with the investigations and working on projects with those marginalized, disenfranchised communities. And then the CAP program, the $100 million that was set aside so that we can use those range of authorities to work with those communities. So we've got resources now. That's always an issue. They're there. We need to put in place the guidance. So that'll be a priority for me coming and moving forward on that in the very near future. With respect to being able to partner and work with these communities, a couple of things I will just mention. I'll go back to looking at comprehensive benefits, which is the Corps is already doing, but then trying to institutionalize that with our agency-specific procedures to implement the principal requirements and guidelines. That's going to be the key. I think that's always been, the strict look at benefit cost has great value. I mean, we should be assessing the economic costs and benefits of our projects. We should be looking at the environmental values aspect, and we should also integrate the societal values. And when you just top-heavy on the economic benefits, those marginalized communities suffer, and they don't compete as well. And we've got to redo our criteria in a way that everybody's on board with so that we can consider those other factors. And we should try and quantify costs and benefits as much as possible, but sometimes it's a discussion, it's a narrative, and we'll do our best to do both aspects, quantification as well as a discussion about those benefits. And lastly, programs like the Tribal Partnership that General Spellmon mentioned. Those are specific programs like the pilot projects that allow us to go work with communities. As I said in my confirmation process, it's not about just undertaking our projects in a way that doesn't harm those communities, but we want to bring the Corps' resources, skills, capabilities to work with those communities and ensure that they get the benefits of those activities that so many other communities have had over the years.
All right, thanks for that. I have a third question, and I'm going to address this, Mr. Connor, to you and to General Spellmon. I think I'll ask General Spellmon to lead off. We'll let you rest for a spell. But the subject is sea level rise, something near and dear to our hearts in the first state, and frankly, a lot of places on the East Coast and the Gulf, and even on the West Coast and the Great Lakes. But gentlemen, as you know, as a senator from the lowest lying state, I've already referenced that once today. But sea level rise and extreme weather becoming more and more of a cause for concern. Earlier this year, I asked General Graham if the Corps accounts for climate change in project designs, and he answered yes. It seems, however, that the Corps only designs projects to address damage from storm surge. And in a storm situation, flooding can have more than one cause. The Corps should comprehensively reduce the risk of all flood hazards when it designs a project, including climate change-fueled sea level rise. My question started with you, General Spellmon, and then turning to Mr. Connor. But given the administration's priority in addressing both the impacts and the root causes of climate change, how will the Corps be working to remedy this shortfall in its project design? General Spellmon.
Sir, I'll start and tell you something that we're working very hard on. And General Graham was correct. We've been using sea level rise curves in our feasibility studies and our projects for the past 12 years. And frankly, we have a great climate change tool that DOD has accepted for use on all of the installations. I would like to see us, and we're working hard on this, and I'll use the example, I'll go back to the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System in Louisiana. We use Lamont sea level rise curves and climate science in the construction of that project. And the Corps has been credited with the performance of that structure, along with our great partners in Louisiana for its performance during Hurricane Ida. And what I'm saying here is that while that concrete and steel and the compacted dirt that protected the city was very, very important, I'm of the opinion that that system performed even better because all of the natural and nature-based features that the state of Louisiana has been working on, the marsh restoration projects, the barrier islands. I think that has got to be an important component in our coastal work moving forward for the reasons that you said, Senator.
All right, thanks for that. Mr. Connor, do you want to add to that or take away?
I would simply add that in a lot of cases now, we're doing these coastal resilience assessments and studies. And I think those are great opportunities to integrate that risk, and continue to evaluate the risk, and then look at the broad array of solutions that we can enhance the existing protections that are already in place. And I think that's going to be critical. I absolutely agree with General Spellman. The integration of natural and nature-based features, the lessons we've learned of how it works in places where it's been done, and how we can take that to other communities, and they're demanding it. I mean, we have communities that are way ahead in their views of what we should be doing with natural and nature-based infrastructure features. So these studies present a great opportunity for us to do the assessment. We've got the tools, as General Spellman noted. It's going to be an ongoing process. Even where we've done resilience activity to date, we have to constantly reassess given new threats and giving new opportunities to address those threats.
All right, then. Thank you. I have one more question I want to ask Mr. Connor of you, and then I'm going to give each of you a minute or two just to close. You give an opportunity to give an opening statement. I'd like to give the opportunity for you to give a little closing statement as well, something you want to reemphasize or something you think that's been missed that you could comment on. But Ms. Connor, my last question would be with respect to the Corps' budget. And as you know, the Congress typically funds the Corps at levels above the President's request. For example, I think in 21, the President's request was about just under $6 billion. I think it was $5.97 billion to be precise, and Congress provided 7.8. So that's an increase. That's probably about a 25% increase above the President's request in FY21. While these numbers are large, the Corps has not made a significant dent in the project backlog, which is estimated, which, as I mentioned earlier, to be nearly, I guess, over $100 billion, maybe closer to $110 billion. Between the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, annual appropriations added to that, and additional supplemental dollars, the Corps is expected to have somewhere between $80 and $100 billion to invest over the next five years. With such a large backlog, how will the Corps balance work on backlog projects while also helping communities that have newly emerging needs?
It's a complex set of issues that we need to deal with, addressing that backlog and moving forward with the new protections and the new demands that exist. And as you note, we do have a significant backlog. I think the figure I saw for WRDA 2020 was something in the neighborhood of another $15 billion. And that goes to the ongoing need and maybe even enhanced need going forward. So I think we've got to look at those projects, and there's a process to continue to look at whether some projects shouldn't move forward, particularly in the way that they were originally envisioned. We want to make sure we use this influx of funds to complete projects, get them off the books, finish the work that we've started, and we want to prioritize the use of projects in the future. We're always going to look at risk from a safety standpoint. We're always going to look at economic, environmental benefits. There are other needs out there and other demands, and also with respect to the administration, we're looking at resilience, we're looking at environmental justice, and we're looking at supply chain as priorities that we need to address. So it's going to be a balance of trying to finish projects, trying to really assess future risks, and moving forward with those priorities. I do believe that we can make a dent with the resources we have. Congress has entrusted us with a lot of resources. I think getting back to that execution piece of this is going to be key, so that you can entrust us with more resources moving forward to address these concerns, because we've got a lot of work to do, and some of it we don't even know about yet, given the new challenges that we're facing.
Okay, thanks for that reply. My last thing is, this is really giving each of you a minute or two, maybe three, to add anything else that you think you'd like to reemphasize, or something maybe that wasn't raised that you'd like to leave on the table. Mr. Connor, why don't you go first, and then we'll go to General Spellman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much more to add. I'm thinking about the points that I'd like to make, and it's just, I think from my standpoint, moving on from WRDA 2020, there's a lot of to-do still out there. Even when we do guidance, even when we finish rulemakings, even when we get those items done, then there's the implementation phase from a policy perspective, and that's going to give rise to a lot more projects and activities. So, you know, we were a little shy here with respect to new authorities because I think you've given us lots of tools and authorities. We want to continue some of those authorities in a more long-term way, such as mentioned with Tribal Partnership Program. We know that that program is really going to take off, that the outreach has been done by the Corps, that we intend to do in the future, not only with tribes, but with other communities that haven't long been served by the Corps. Those programs are going to take off. So I'm not suggesting a light touch at all with WRDA 2020. There's projects, there's proposals that are identified in our 7001 report that are going to be coming to you that already have with the 2021 report. But this is an ongoing process, and a backlog will continue to build, but we want to make effective use of the resources we have and demonstrate that we can execute on the expectations.
All right, thank you. Thanks. Joel Spellman, any final thoughts you want to
Yes,
leave?
Senator
with
Carper,
us?
first of all, thanks for your time today and
no.
that of all the committee members. As Secretary Connor said, this is a historic level of investment in the Army Corps of Engineers, and we certainly appreciate the trust that Congress and the administration has placed in us. But now we have to deliver. We absolutely have to deliver on this historic level of investment. And you just have my commitment. We have every tool on the table to get these projects on the ground. So whether it's new contracting strategies, new acquisition strategies, delegations, workload sharing, which we experienced in Delaware not too long ago, non-federal sponsor-led work under the 1043 authority, or any other tool. We are an open book. We want to be completely transparent with you and the committee to help us get this work in the ground.
Good. Well, thank you for doing double duty today this morning with the House Representatives, Infrastructure, the Oversight Committee there, and then for joining us here this afternoon. I spent a lot of years of my life in the Navy. My dad was a chief petty officer for, gosh, over 25, close to 30 years, all in. And I always felt that leadership is the single most important ingredient in the success of any organization I've been a part of. I'm encouraged by the leadership we have, civilian and military, and with respect to the Army Corps of Engineers and their responsibilities. So thank you both for your willing to sign up to do this work, and we look forward to working with you. The time I spent in the Navy, I was always impressed with some of the finest officers I ever served with were people who had been prior enlisted. We call them DSEPs, Mustangs. And some of the finest people I served with were folks who were non-commissioned officers, including chief petty officers like my dad and others. And I think you asked us to look at some of the language to see if we might give folks who enjoy those ranks some opportunities to make greater contributions. We'll take a close look at that. And this is not the end of a conversation, it's the beginning of a conversation. And we look forward to continuing that conversation, making sure that all this money, all these resources that have been appropriated, find a good place to go, consistent with the guidance we provided, and that we can be proud of the implementation that lies ahead. With that, I've got a little bit of housekeeping, very little bit of housekeeping to do in order to close our hearing. Senators will be allowed to submit questions for the record through close of business on Wednesday, January 26th, and we'll compile those questions and send them to you, both of you, and we ask that you reply to them by Thursday, January 27th. Not really. We're asking you to respond. We're going to get the questions back from our committee by Wednesday, January 26th, and we're going to go all the way till Wednesday, February 9th, in order to reply. We ask you to try to be timely in those responses. It's important stuff, and for especially those of us on the coast of our country, and frankly, I don't know, Senator Ernst was here talking about the needs that they have in Iowa, and we have heard from folks in, Michigan and Alaska. There's a huge interest in the work you do, and we're anxious to be good partners. And thank you again for your leadership and for your testimony today. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thanks very much.